Today I'm going to shoot a quick troubleshooting video about diagnosing a coolant leak on a TDi Passat. This would apply for the generation that's 2012 through 2014. Here is the oil filter housing, and it also has the oil filter cooler integrated into it. And I have seen a number of these fail now, and that's why I'm making this video. It's a little tricky to diagnose. This is the bad one that I've removed. But if you go up in here, so here's the front end of the car, we're going under here. Here is part of our intercooler. And if we go, we'll see if I can get this lit up, but there's the cooler. You can see the cooler on the end of the housing there, and there's the housing between the cooler and the block. And you can see where it bolts to the block right there. So what happens is, and this is exactly what I've seen every time on this, you've got these O-ring gaskets that sit in a groove. Well, if you look right there, you can see how part of the casting, the plastic casting, has broken away, allowing that O-ring gasket to pop out like that. And the interesting thing is that I've seen these really intermittent. I've had them where they leak a lot. I actually experienced this problem when I drove from Minneapolis to Chicago. I got to Chicago and smelled coolant, and I proceeded to have to add a couple gallons on my way home. I kept it full, never overheated it. But then about halfway back, it quit leaking altogether. That O-ring must have popped back into place, and the pressure in the system held it in place. So it's tricky to diagnose because it doesn't always leak, and inevitably it's Murphy's Law that once you get it up in the air and start looking at it, you're not going to be able to see it leaking. So my advice, and it's hard to get this lit up, but my advice is to kind of look at the base of it and see if it's wet there, see if there's coolant running down the side of the block. This has the insulator off of it, but if the insulator's soaked, a lot of times I've seen it run down, and this one I drained some coolant out of it, so you can see some coolant hanging on things. But this is similar to what you'll see when you've got a bad oil filter housing. So even if it's flowing all the way down here, there's a number of coolant lines through here, and it's easy to think that you've got a bad hose somewhere. But I've seen enough of these oil filter housings go bad that is what I would suspect. So look around, do your best to see if, you know, how high up the wet coolant goes. You can swap it out without removing the intercooler, although that's sort of a word play because you have to disconnect it. You take the charge hose off one side and disconnect it from the throttle body up top, and then you can move it enough out of the way that you can get to the housing. And if you look here, we've got a little clip that pops in there, and then we've got 4 bolts that bolt it in place. They're all triple square. And then we've got a coolant hose that goes right there. So there's really not a whole lot that attaches to it. It's not the easiest job because it is buried in there, but you don't have to take the intercooler out, and you can do it. So if you've got a mysterious coolant leak that maybe comes and goes, this would be at the top of my list of things to look at.